A self-governance strategy for Tea Partiers. This video is brought to you by the Sego movement, the self-governance people. This is you. You're an average American. One day, a friend tells you that the federal government is bankrupting us. You do some research and here's what you find. For more than 100 years after its founding, the federal government was pretty small. A few percent, except during wars. But for the last 100 years, the size, scope, and authority of the federal government has steadily grown. Today, the federal government is spending more as a percentage of GDP than at the peak of World War I. What is the result of all this spending? You owe money. This is how much you owe. The federal level is huge, way too huge. In fact, Washington, D.C. is bankrupting us. Now you're angry. But what do? But there's only one of you. But you hear other people are angry too. You hear about these gatherings called tea parties. You go to a Tea Party rally. You find other people who are angry too, but you find out that they want things to change. They want to fix the problem. You find out that they stand for fiscal responsibility, limited government, and free markets, just like you do. Now, it turns out there are a lot of you. 13% of the voters. That's a lot of people. Now, after the Tea Party, you're no longer angry. You're just determined. Determined and steely-eyed. But now what do? Well, first, you need some leverage. This is Congress. These are the guys who are spending more than we can afford. This is you in Congress. This is not to scale. This is you in Congress at scale. You're small. How can one person make a difference? You need leverage. This is Archimedes. He's Greek. He's been dead for a couple of millennia, but a saying that he said still lives. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum upon which to place it, and I will move the world. This is Archimedes moving the world. This is not to scale either. This is you trying to move Congress. You need a lot of leverage, a lot more than you have. Maybe you can help by getting your Tea Partiers together. Together you can move Congress, but this is still not to scale, and you still need a lot more leverage. Why? Congress is made up of 435 people in the House of Representatives, and you only get to vote for one of these people. And each district has more than 700,000 people. Even during the low point, during non-presidential election cycles, there are more than 180,000 voters in a district. Average margin of victory is 30%. So to change the outcome of the election, you need to move the vote by 30%, but there's only about 13% of the voters who are Tea Partiers. So you just don't have enough between you and your friends to make a difference. You need more leverage. Here's the proof. 99% of incumbents are renominated, and 95% of incumbents are reelected. Even during periods of dramatic change, like 2010, 75% of the seats will stay the same. This is you again. You're still steely-eyed, but you're angry again. Fortunately, your anger doesn't last long. You think about Archimedes. You need more leverage. What if we tried to move a state legislature instead? Let's say the state legislature in Iowa. Iowa's a great state, a favorite of presidential candidates, a bellwether of national politics, the Hawkeye state. But what can just one state do? Not much, you say? Well, you're right. One state, acting alone, can't change the federal government. But what if a group of states got together? Now, it turns out there's a way for states to act together and take back power from the federal government. It's been around since before the Constitution was written. It's called an interstate compact. Now, an interstate compact is really just a contract among a group of states. It can be as few as 2 states, like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. There are some compacts that apply to multiple states. Life insurance, for instance, is regulated through the Interstate Insurance Compact. It's not a federal agency. It is an interstate compact among states that each individually regulate the life insurance business. So it turns out there are hundreds of these interstate compacts. What's interesting is that when interstate compacts are ratified by Congress, they become federal law. In fact, Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to approve interstate compacts. But if Congress ratifies the compact, that compact actually supersedes federal law. Now, this is a very powerful instrument for taking authority back from Congress. Obviously, the more states in the compact, the more likely the Congress will ratify it. And crucially, the president does not have to sign an interstate compact. Interstate compacts create leverage on Congress. Interstate compacts can take away almost any power from Washington, D.C., and it's done with the consent of Congress. For instance, states could get together and create a healthcare compact. This compact could leave regulation of healthcare up to the states, not the federal government. This would effectively give the states the right to opt out of Obamacare. And if Congress ratifies it, it effectively repeals Obamacare in those states. Now, after the power is returned to the states, each state could develop healthcare regulations that reflect the will of the people of that state. For instance, some states may want a single-payer system, and they can create one. Others may want a more market-based system with prices and consumer rights. They can create one as well. The key is each state has the flexibility to do that within the compact, but they have to live with the system they create. This effectively moves the power from the federal government to the state government. Now, crucially, states control the interstate compact process, right? States draft the compact, states approve the language. Congress only ratifies. It cannot amend. It must cast an up or down vote. A majority is all that is needed in both chambers. An interstate compact is a political weapon. It's not a purely a legal weapon, right? This is effectively a way to pick a fight with Congress over an area that they've done a lousy job. And that means that it has to be won at the political level. And because it's originating from the states, it means that the state elections have to be won first. Can you win at the state level? Is the Tea Party strong enough to win? Well, let's go back and look at the case of Iowa, although most of the other states are similar. Let's look at the state house. In a general election, there are about 12,000 voters per district. There are 100 representatives in Iowa, and the average margin of victory in the general election is 36%, even greater than Congress. Now, with Tea Parties only comprising about 13% of the voters, this is just not enough votes to single-handedly sway the outcome of a general election. But the story is different in primaries. Let's look at those 100 representatives running in those races. There are fewer than 3,000 votes per primary, and the average margin of victory is 726 votes. Now, a Tea Party at 13% is about 1,500 votes. So there are more than twice as many Tea Party members as there is the average margin of victory in state house primaries. This means that the Tea Parties by themselves can get together and provide the margin of victory that assures their candidate can win in the state house races. The story for the Senate's even better. There's only 50 senators in Iowa and only 25 run per cycle. The average margin here is 931 votes. Because there's half as many districts, there are twice as many Tea Parties. So we're talking about a situation in the Senate races where the Tea Parties can provide 3 times the margin of victory. So this means it should be easy to beat incumbents in primaries, right? You know, that sounds too easy, because it is. In reality, it's not competitive. Why? Why don't incumbents have competition in primaries? Well, the main reason is the political parties. The political parties do not support competition. In fact, they undermine competition in the primaries. Both parties do this, Republican and Democrat. You see that parties are controlled by the incumbents, and the parties control the primaries. And so the incumbents use the parties to keep competition out of the primary process. So the result is they rarely, if ever, see a challenger in a primary. For instance, in 2010 in Iowa, in the Senate there are 25 races, 22 incumbents running for re-election. 21 of those were unopposed in primaries. In the House, the numbers are similar. 100 races, 86 incumbents, 79 unopposed in primaries. So we're talking about more than 90% of incumbents running for re-election having no opposition in the primaries. So even if you wanted to affect change, there's no one else to vote for. I should point out here that the numbers are 76 for state house incumbents nationwide and 80% of state senate. Basically, the parties and the incumbents work together to give them a free pass in the primaries. There is no fight in the primary election, and the general election is a fake fight. The districts themselves are set by incumbents. They're one-party districts, and they're designed to give them the maximal advantage. In short, the game is rigged in favor of incumbents. And this is not a Republican or a Democratic thing. This is what both parties do. This is you again. You're really angry now. Then you figure it out. and you tell your Tea Party friends. And they get it too. Here's what you figure out and you decide to do. First, you go to your incumbent state senator and state representative. You tell them you want your state to take back power from the federal government. To do that, you want them to vote for interstate compacts. Now, if they agree to do this, and they should because it's in their interest, you're asking them to get more power for themselves, then great, you're set to go and you get the votes you need to pass the interstate compact. They'll probably agree. They'll also probably agree because you have leverage now. Why? Because of this new verb that you're going to introduce them to primary. If they don't support this move to bring the power back to the states, you will primary them. Primarying means beating an incumbent in a primary election. Now, how will you do that? First thing, if they don't cooperate, you'll find a challenger to run against them in the primary. If they're a Democratic incumbent, you're going to find a Democrat to run against them. If they're a Republican incumbent, you will find a Republican to run against them. This is where the incumbents are most vulnerable. A few hundred votes can sway the outcome. But right now they have no one running against them. But if they don't work with you to pass interstate compact, they will. The Tea Parties have proven that they understand how to use primaries, and they proved that in this cycle in the U.S. Senate races. Now, once that's happened and you found a good candidate, then you and your Tea Party friends will have to go to work for that challenger. You'll have to help them meet people in the district. You'll have to invite them to Tea Party events. You'll gather names of volunteers to work for the challenger. You're going to give them support to help them get elected. During the primary election, you're going to turn out to vote. And you're going to get people who've never voted in a primary before to turn out to vote for the first time. And you're going to get people who voted in the wrong primary to vote in the right primary. You want to focus on taking out the incumbent who's in the way, the incumbent who won't work with you to bring power back to the state. The primary here is key because in more than 75% of the races, the outcome of the primary determines the outcome of the race. Then, having won the primary and moving into the general election, for the most part, the challenger will be a shoo-in because, remember, this is a fake fight. But you still need to work to win the general election. Then the challenger wins, and it's time to take on the federal government. Before, if we had a model of trying to move the entire United States with a small group of people in your Tea Party, that seems hopeless, but that's not the right way to think about this problem. This is the right way to think about the problem. We're going to get people all over the country to get organized and take back control from the federal government by first taking control of their state legislature. Then we'll get the states to work together to pass these interstate compacts and go to Washington, D.C. and demand that Congress give the authority back to the states. And once that happens, every state will come up with a slightly different solution. So after winning a bunch of states, at the local level, we can now push through our interstate compacts. But why should Congress ratify these? I mean, after all, we're talking about Congress giving up a lot of power to the states. Why would Congress do that? It's simple, because they can be primaried too. And not by you in the Tea Party directly, but by the governor and the state legislators. You see, a lot of state legislators, and sometimes the governor, would like to be in Congress. And if a congressional incumbent plays ball and ratifies the interstate compact, then that's not a problem. They're on our side and we'll support them. But if they don't, the person running against them in the primary will be the state legislator that's there trying to get them to ratify the interstate compact. So let's recap. The Tea Party creates leverage with the incumbent state legislator. Either the incumbent state legislature works for interstate compact or get primaried and replaced. The state legislators then carry the compact to Congress. Each state's congressional delegation either supports the compact or gets primaried by the state legislators that bring the compact to them. This works because it's in the interest of the state legislator to get more power through the interstate compact or by beating the congressional incumbent in a primary. So in summary, the Tea Parties can primary state legislators. This gives them leverage. The state legislators and Tea Partiers can primary congressional incumbents. This gives them leverage. All of this leverage is used to pass interstate compacts, and those interstate compacts bring power back to the states, which increases the leverage of the states and the Tea Parties and decreases the leverage of Congress. This creates a virtuous circle that brings the power back from Washington, D.C. to the states and then back to the people. And when the power comes back to the people, we can once again govern ourselves.